are we?
Hello, my name is Jen. I'll be your host today. We are in end of October 2019 at a conference on vaccines.
I mean, can you give us a better sense of how far we've come on our approach to a universal vaccine in the last, decade?
Yeah.
If you recall, this was 1 month prior to the so-called China virus.
Well, we really didn't, Michael, we didn't have a real confidence in the scientific basis that we could actually induce a response, or even what components of the virus, if you did have an immune response against, would actually be able to broadly cover.
Fauci is confident that there is a new technological opportunity that has become mature only recently, and it should not be left on the sideline.
Now that we know that if in fact you make a response against the part of the virus that doesn't change, that's not something we knew 40 years ago. That's something that just now it's beginning to appreciate.
But it seems that this great technology is not living to its potential, because people don't get it.
The critical challenge, and it relates to one of the things that Peggy said, is that in order to make the transition from getting out of the tried and true egg growing.
Egg growing is the traditional way of building inactivated virus vaccine,
which we know gives us results that can be, beneficial. I mean, we've done well with that, to something that has to be much better. You have to prove that this works. And then you've got to go through all of the clinical trials, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3, and then show that this particular product is going to be good over a period of years. That alone, if it works perfectly, is going to take a decade.
Fauci seems very sad, because he will not live long enough to witness this revolution.
Well, I'm not a representative of industry, but I'll pretend I'm one. I make a flu vaccine every year, and it sells, and it protects people to the degree that we can expect.
No incentive.
What did Fauci just say?
So you have no incentive. Why the hell would I go spend $400 million to do this thing, which may be great, and then if it's really great, you give it once or twice or 5 times.
And that's where the federal government comes in.
Well, yeah,
seriously.
with all your money.
No, seriously.
You see, these bunch of high-profile biotech guys are very desperate about making the world realize one thing. What they are onto is much, much more important than what the world is currently understanding. So they have to do something.
What happens is, in fact, you bring up an excellent point. Our responsibility to the public health and not the profit line has to be able to push the process.
Fauci has had a prophetic revelation.
Our prophet has returned.
He must go against the sheep's short-sightedness and create a drastic change.
To the point where industry will find it to their benefit to do that.
In 2019, governments are not willing to finance private corporations to do research. It's hard to sell to the public that so much money will go into scientists' pockets for a technology which is promising but untested.
Si j'ai beaucoup de chance, on trouvera peut-être une dent plantée dans le bitume, c'est tout.
And who solves a problem which doesn't exist, aka a potential pandemic.
I think if you're going to sit back and wait for a company that's been growing virus in eggs for the last 30 years to spontaneously change without any incentive, without any de-risking, it's just not going to happen.
Fauci needs to reshape the incentives so that they fit his worldview.
I think if you're going to sit back and wait for a company to spontaneously change without any incentive, without any de-risking, it's just not going to happen.
They are in a field where nobody really cares to fund because the market demand is too thin. And this can be such a bummer. My friend wants to build a tire replacement company. He really loves tires, but not enough people take the car these days. So he decided to throw a few nails here and there, on the road, to bring in more customers. It works. Now he is happy because people have newer tires than before, and he also became a bit richer.
But I digress.
We're not conducting really large efficacy trials, understanding the details of the immune response. We're not comparing the new technologies that we're getting licensed today for influenza vaccine against each other in the seasonal influenza world every single year around the world, where we distribute 150 million doses of seasonal vaccine in our country every year. We don't even know how many people are getting vaccinated, how many of those doses are delivered to people.
People have too much privacy.
Which doses they got and what the real outcome was, so we can learn from that knowledge base.
This guy is really smart. Probably a business grad. Hear what he found out. If you can track who got what vaccine, with a central database of some sort, then you can skip the tedious trial phases. Brilliant.
On how to optimize or improve our vaccine. So there are opportunities we have today with the wealth of knowledge and data that's been created for a number of years that has still been ignored because it's not pulled up into some larger brain trust for those 40 different companies to leverage. We need to move as quickly as possible and urgently as possible.
Do people in the room understand how fast he means?
The Council of Economic Advisors from the White House just put out a report in line with an executive order from the White House saying that we need to prioritize development of vaccines for influenza that are fast. And so right now they're, as you said, mediocre and slow.
Lobbying rocks.
A mediocre and fast vaccine is even better than a mediocre and slow vaccine, honestly. But we can make better vaccines and make them faster. But $361 billion every year is our economic cost for seasonal influenza. In a pandemic, that goes into the trillions of dollars. You know, we have to take that sense of urgency, that economic cost, that societal disruption, and the lives lost into perspective.
We have to behave as if there was a pandemic. In 2019, we have not had any, but I insist. We need to behave as if there was one, because there could be one. Pangolins, bats and stuff.
The Milken Institute is here in Washington. Knowledge and innovation is one of our pillars, and we teamed up with Aspen last year to pull together a group. And the idea was a diverse group of big thinkers.
If you are also a big thinker, don't forget to like and subscribe.
People from science, people from philanthropy, from industry, from journalism, to take on issues in vaccine and vaccination. And not surprisingly, given that it was the 100th anniversary of the 1918 pandemic, that was the issue. And that's where that's where that speechless video came from. But that's where the urgency came from. And the recognition is we need to do some things differently.
And I was starting to develop some public health preparedness programs. And I went to FEMA to talk to them about doing a tabletop exercise with us around preparedness for a biological threat. And we were going to do a flu pandemic-like scenario. You know, people just still don't think enough about what this really means in our daily lives and what the impacts are, even though every year we're suffering a lot of preventable death, illness, and disability.
And when people don't see the problems, what should we do? Same as when Daddy doesn't listen. We make some noise.
Bruce, you can address this, is a PR issue in some ways, because people talk about the flu. I had the flu. I feel fluish. And about 80% of the time, I'm making that number up, but it's a lot of the time, they don't really have the flu. Like last night, I had a bug. I do what I do for a living, so I won't call it the stomach flu, because I'm quite sure it isn't, but most people would call it that. Is that part of the problem, that we don't have appropriate nomenclature?
What about some Greek letters, like Delta or Omicron?
I think that feeds it. There's complacency, I think, on that side as well. Peggy also mentioned the institutional architecture that keeps innovation from happening. I think those two things are connected. That the people say, well, the disease isn't so bad. I had the flu. I got over it. The vaccine isn't so great. Good enough. I'll take it. So I think there's that piece of it as well.
I understand. What he is saying is that the flu is not a big enough threat, and that is why people don't care enough. But the vaccine innovation sector needs funding. So what can we do? I wish the flu was more dangerous, and then it would make economic sense to fund these biotech companies.
Well, that's why I asked the dark and unpleasant question, does something really bad have to happen? And it seems to me one of the curses of the public health world is, if you guys do your job well, everyone goes along and they're healthy.
And they cut your funding.
Right.
Private companies now depend on public money to exist. I thought the private sector was taxed to fund government institutions. Okay, so it's the other way around now.
But if you don't, or if you do your job well and people get sick anyway, then somehow you just failed. And I'm not sure how you get around that.
In closing, I'm glad nobody has misunderstood this conference's alarming tone and thought it would be a good idea to release a virus, just to raise some awareness.
Without any incentive, without any de-risking, it's just not going to happen. Does something really bad have to happen?